Before we begin, make sure to like the video, drop a comment telling us what you do inside the galaxy's most dangerous jungle, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another HFY story. Now, let's enter the forbidden jungle. Orion Graves arrived at the quarantine perimeter just as the twin suns dipped low enough to stain the metal barricades in bands of copper and rust. The outpost guards watched him with a mixture of pity and morbid anticipation, the way gamblers study a doomed wager they still hope might surprise them. Orion felt their eyes but didn't acknowledge them. He signed the entry waiver with the same calm expression he might wear when ordering breakfast, the pen scraping across the old-fashioned paper as if the words, "assumption of mortal risk," were merely decorative. The guard captain, a tall Avesian with a ridge of cobalt scales across his brow, cleared his throat. "Human, you do understand no one who enters the Varric jungle returns. Not hunters, not rangers, not council soldiers." Orion met his gaze. "Then statistically speaking, someone is overdue." The captain blinked, clearly unsure whether that was arrogance or gallows humor. Orion didn't elaborate. He adjusted the straps of his pack, checked the charge on his wrist light, and stepped through the shimmering quarantine gate. The jungle greeted him with silence first, an unnatural, suspended stillness. Then, slowly the world awakened. Bioluminescent spores drifted like drifting smoke, their pale blues and greens illuminating broad-leafed plants that pulsed with faint internal light. Insects chittered high in the canopy, their wings cutting the air like tiny blades. Something large shifted far beyond visibility, its footsteps too heavy to belong to anything prey-like. Orion took it all in with the steady, receptive focus of a man used to reading danger by scent and vibration. His upbringing among Earth's harsher nature reserves had trained him well, but the Varric jungle carried a pressure he had never felt before, an awareness as if the entire ecosystem watched him take each step. A vine twitched above him. Orion froze. The vine retracted quickly, retreating into the canopy in a serpentine glide. Not an attack, just curiosity. The jungle was cataloging him. He moved deeper, making deliberate, unhurried progress. His boots sank into soft soil rich with the scent of minerals and rot. Every sense warned him that something followed. The watchers at the outpost would assume it was already over for him. Most entrants didn't last 10 minutes. Orion lasted 30 before he saw the first sign of what had killed them. A titan beast lay collapsed in a clearing ahead, its armored hide split open in clean curved trenches. Orion crouched beside the carcass, studying the wounds with clinical precision. Whatever struck it had talons capable of carving through bone-plated armor. More concerning was the pattern. The beast had been felled efficiently, not savaged. A surgical kill. A hunter's kill. The air grew colder. Orion turned his head slowly, not wanting to startle whatever watched him. Two silver eyes shone from the shadow between the roots of a colossal tree. Not reflective, self-luminous. Intelligent. Assessing him. Orion steadied his breathing. Running was meaningless. Prey runs. He stood, projecting the unyielding posture he had learned facing wolves on Earth, shoulders squared, chin level, hands visible but ready. The creature stepped forward. It was immense, tall enough that its silhouette distorted the foliage behind it. Midnight fur rippled over coiled muscles. Bioluminescent lines traced its limbs like burning constellations. Its mandibles flexed in a slow, deliberate motion that felt less like aggression and more like thought. Intelligence lived behind those silver eyes. A dangerous, evaluating intelligence. "You're the one they call the Apex," Orion murmured. The beast tilted its head, as though puzzled by the sound of a human voice spoken without terror. Orion didn't move. The jungle seemed to hold its breath with him. A distant rumble rolled through the canopy, something falling or crashing or approaching. The apex predator's ears twitched toward the sound. Its muscles shifted subtly, repositioning its weight. Orion recognized the stance, not preparation to pounce but readiness to defend. So something else was in the jungle tonight. Something the apex considered a threat. The creature's gaze snapped back to him, its eyes narrowing, not in hostility but in concentration. It took one slow step toward him, then another, closing the distance until Orion could feel the heat of its breath. It lowered its head until their eyes aligned. Orion didn't reach for his weapon. He simply said quietly, "I'm not here to hunt you." The creature inhaled sharply. A sound echoed in its throat, too complex to be a growl, too soft to be a warning. Then it turned, sharply, staring into the trees where the crash had originated. The canopy shook. Something else was coming. The apex predator backed away from Orion, not retreating but repositioning, as though placing itself strategically between him and the unseen threat. Orion recognized the gesture. Instinctual, protective, not directed at him but around him. The air grew heavy. The jungle's light dimmed, responding to some larger presence. Orion reached for the only tool he needed, his instincts. The apex predator's bioluminescent lines brightened in anticipation. Another thunderous impact shook the earth. Orion looked at the shadowed path ahead, feeling the tension coil around him like a tightening rope. Whatever approached had killed everything that ventured into this jungle, except, apparently, the two beings preparing to stand their ground. Orion exhaled once through his nose, calm and certain. "All right," he whispered to the unseen threat. "Show yourself." And beside him, the apex predator stepped forward, ready to kill or defend, but unmistakably choosing to face the danger with him. The jungle closed around them, hungry to see what would happen next. The thing that crashed through the undergrowth announced itself with snapping branches and a low, guttural roar that vibrated through the soil. Orion recognized the rhythm of its footsteps, not stealthy, not deliberate. This was a challenger, a territorial brute blindly asserting dominance. The apex predator beside him shifted its stance, its luminous markings pulsing as if igniting battle instincts embedded deep in its evolutionary memory. Orion didn't know whether it saw him as an ally or a temporary asset, but the creature hadn't left his side. That was enough. The rival beast burst into the clearing with the clumsy rage of something that had grown strong without ever needing to grow intelligent. Thick-limbed, plated with ridged bone, its maw split open into rows of jagged teeth. It stopped short when it spotted the apex predator, and the air between them charged with an electric hostility that felt almost visible. Orion stepped just out of their direct line, ensuring neither mistook him for prey. He kept his breathing slow, aware that sudden motion might redirect aggression toward him. The apex predator emitted a low harmonic rumble that resonated through his ribs, not a threat but a warning. The rival beast ignored it and lunged. The apex moved with terrifying efficiency. It pivoted sideways, claws carving arcs of shimmering blue as they sliced through bone plating. The rival shrieked, spinning in an effort to counterattack, but the apex already anticipated the angle. Orion watched the precision with a strange sense of awe. This was no wild animal. This was a tactician embedded in muscle and instinct. The fight surged around him like a violent dance. Orion dodged back as the rival's tail swept across the ground, uprooting bushes and sending spores into the air in glittering waves. The apex leapt, anchoring itself onto the beast's back and driving its luminous claws deep. The clearing quaked as the rival collapsed under the coordinated onslaught. A final wrenching strike silenced it. The jungle fell quiet again. The apex dismounted the carcass and turned toward Orion. Its chest rose and fell rapidly, but its eyes held no madness, only awareness. Orion felt that same awareness sweep over him, searching, reading. The creature took one heavy step forward before its front legs buckled slightly. Blood dripped from a gash along its flank, an injury inflicted during the first lunge. Orion raised his hands in a posture of non-threatening approach. "Let me see," he murmured, keeping his voice level. The creature did not retreat. If anything, it seemed to stabilize its weight so he could inspect the damage. The wound wasn't fatal, but it was deep enough to attract other hunters if left untreated. He knelt beside it, retrieving a sealant tube from his pack. The apex tensed at the hiss of the sprayer, its claws digging into the soil, yet it remained still. Orion applied the sealant in firm, practiced strokes, the gel hardening into a protective layer. The creature's breathing eased. Its gaze softened, if such a word could be used for a predator capable of breaking armored beasts in half. "You could have killed me earlier," Orion said quietly. "But you didn't." The apex's head tilted as though considering his words. Its bioluminescent lines dimmed to a softer glow, matching the subdued sounds of the surrounding foliage. For a moment, there was an unspoken connection, not sentimental but mutual recognition. Two beings who understood the mechanics of survival. Then the jungle's quiet shifted. A faint metallic chirp echoed from above. Orion's hand went immediately to his sidearm. The apex snapped its gaze skyward, mandibles flexing in irritation rather than fear. A drone hovered between the branches, its chassis camouflaged to mimic leaves until its optical sensors glinted. Orion had seen this kind of model before, lightweight, agile, used by mercenary scouts for high-risk biomes. But this one didn't belong to the Council. Its insignia was wrong, a stylized fong etched onto its casing. The drone word, recording, scanning, transmitting. Orion's pulse sharpened. Someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly what the apex predator looked like, and who would send a drone with enough stealth to follow it. The apex emitted a growl that vibrated through the clearing, less animalistic and more irate, as if aware of the surveillance. It crouched as though preparing to leap, but Orion raised a hand. Wait. He understood predators and he understood hunters. That drone wasn't a scout for a scientific expedition. It was the eyes of someone who wanted the creature captured, or dead. The drone flickered, adjusting its focus. A thin red light scanned Orion, then the apex, then the dead rival beast. The apex's mane flared in response, its lines brightening into a warning luminescence that cast shadows on the trees. Before the creature could jump, Orion drew his pistol and fired a single controlled shot. The plasma bolt struck the drone's stabilizer, sending it tumbling into the foliage with a burst of sparks. The apex turned toward him with a deep, resonant chuff. Approval? Or recognition? Orion wasn't entirely sure. He walked toward the smoking wreckage, ready to stomp the remaining circuitry. Before he reached it, the drone's cracked display flickered. A distorted voice rasped through the static. Asset location confirmed. Prepare containment teams. Orion's jaw tightened. Containment meant force. Force meant death, either his or the apex's. The creature moved to his side, towering over him, its presence both imposing and strangely grounding. It didn't understand the words, but it understood the tone. Danger. Orion crushed the drone under his boot, the components snapping loudly. The apex flinched at the sudden sound but didn't retreat. It stayed beside him, its gaze flicking between the forest edge and the human who had just declared himself an enemy of whoever monitored the sky. He looked up through the canopy. Whoever wanted the apex wasn't going to wait long. Mercenaries didn't lose assets easily, and they didn't tolerate interference, especially from humans. We need to move, he said. The apex stepped forward first as if agreeing to lead the way, not in dominance but in partnership. Orion followed, noting how its pace matched his stride, neither rushing ahead nor letting him fall behind. For the first time since entering the Varric jungle, he wasn't just surviving. He was being escorted. And somewhere behind the trees, the hunters who had sent the drone were already closing in, unaware that the human and the apex predator had just formed an alliance they could not possibly anticipate. The jungle's density thickened as Orion and the apex pressed deeper into its bioluminescent labyrinth. Vines hung like woven cords, pulsing with slow rhythms, and the air carried a metallic tension that warned him they were no longer alone. The apex moved with measured purpose, its stride steady and deliberate, though its ears twitched at every unnatural sound. Orion recognized the behavior. This was not simply a creature navigating its territory. This was an apex hunter adapting to the approach of an unfamiliar threat. A distant hum reached them, faint at first, then sharpening into a synchronized cadence. Orion halted. The apex mirrored him instantly, its luminescent lines dimming as if instinctively hiding its glow. The hum grew louder, the cadence resolving into mechanical wing beats and boot falls. He knew the pattern. Mercenaries. Not amateurs. A professional guild. The first shadow glided overhead, a sleek reconnaissance skimmer moving low enough to disturb the spores on the forest floor. Orion pulled the apex back beneath a curved root, motioning for silence. The creature followed his command without hesitation, though its claws scraped lightly against the bark, eager for confrontation. Voices crackled from the skimmer's underside, their tone clipped and confident. Thermal readings tracked to this quadrant. Human signature present. Apex lifeform confirmed. Authorization to engage pending. The apex stiffened. Orion placed a steadying hand on its flank, feeling the muscle coil like compressed springs. For a moment he sensed a shift in their dynamic. The creature was not simply protecting itself, it was waiting for his decision. He whispered, "We move only when they commit." The skimmer passed overhead, leaving a ripple of disturbed foliage in its wake. As it faded, the apex let out a low growl that carried more frustration than fear. Orion understood. These mercenaries were not here to test their luck or hunt for sport. They wanted the apex alive and they wanted him out of the way. A sudden explosion of kinetic force shattered a tree trunk nearby. Orion dove aside, rolling behind a cluster of thick, shield-like leaves. The apex launched upward with terrifying speed, avoiding a tactical net that flared open like a metallic blossom. Mercenaries emerged from the shadows, armored in matte black suits designed to dampen sound and heat signatures. Their helmets displayed angular visors shaped like predator eyes, an aesthetic Orion recognized. The Fangstrike Guild. The lead mercenary raised his gauntlet. "Stand down, human. You're interfering with a contracted acquisition." Orion stepped forward, hands lifted but not surrendering. You're not equipped to contain that creature without provoking a massacre. The mercenary's visor adjusted, analyzing him. We've handled worse than an overgrown carnivore. Move aside. Behind Orion, the apex revealed itself with a thunderous roar that shook leaves from the canopy. Its glowing lines flared into a luminous pattern of defiance. The mercenaries flinched but did not retreat. Instead, several deployed concussion snares that crackled with blue arcs. Orion swore under his breath. They had prepared for this. He grabbed a sharp piece of fallen carapace and hurled it at the closest snare. The device detonated prematurely, knocking 2 mercenaries off balance. The apex seized the opening and charged. Its first strike flattened a soldier, armor crumpling like thin foil. A second mercenary attempted to fire a tranquilizer burst, but the apex spun with feral grace, its tail sweeping him into the undergrowth. Orion moved with equal precision, exploiting every distraction. He kicked a fallen rifle toward a cluster of bioluminescent roots, knowing the jungle's electrical flora would short it out. The resulting spark briefly illuminated the battlefield. Chaos erupted. The mercenaries tried to regroup, but they had underestimated the symmetry forming between human and predator. Orion's combat instincts aligned with the apex's raw power, creating a rhythm neither had practiced but both understood. The creature watched his movements, adjusting its assaults to match his angles. Every time Orion advanced, the apex guarded his blind spot. Every time the apex lunged, Orion seized the opening it created. But the mercenaries were relentless. More poured in, their armor reflecting dull glints of artificial light. A heavy exoframe dropped from the canopy, landing with earth-trembling force. It stood nearly as tall as the apex, its plating etched with the Fangstrike insignia. The operator inside amplified his voice. Target acquired. Terminate the human. The apex snarled with murderous intent. Orion pulled a flash charge from his belt, flicked the primer and hurled it at the exoframe's optics. The explosion flared white, buying precious seconds. The apex used those seconds ferociously, leaping onto the machine's torso and driving its claws into the joints. Sparks showered the ground as the exoframe staggered. The mercenaries shifted tactics. Snares, tranquilizers and sonic disruptors all converged on the apex. One snare latched onto its hind leg, eliciting a guttural cry that cracked with both fury and pain. Orion sprinted toward the creature, ripping the snare's power node free before the shock could intensify. The apex jerked away from another incoming net, but its movement faltered. Orion could see a weakening. He grabbed its shoulder and shouted, "We have to retreat." The apex hesitated only a breath before nodding with a sharp, almost human understanding. Together they plunged into the thicker part of the jungle. Sonic blasts tore through the trees behind them and metallic footsteps thundered in pursuit, but the apex maneuvered with uncanny precision, choosing paths that disrupted sightlines and muffled sound. Orion followed its lead, trusting its instincts as much as his own. They didn't stop running until the jungle swallowed the chasing echoes and replaced them with an uneasy silence. The apex collapsed to one knee, panting, its wounds leaking faint trails of bioluminescent fluid. Orion knelt beside it, checking the extent of the damage. The creature watched him with unblinking trust. He whispered, "They're not going to stop." The apex responded with a low rumble that expressed both agreement and readiness to fight again. They were hunted now, not by the jungle but by a force determined to turn the galaxy's deadliest predator into a commodity. Orion tightened the straps of his pack and rose. "Then we make our stand somewhere they don't expect." The apex rose beside him, towering yet steady, as the jungle's dim glow framed their silhouettes like an omen of the battle to come. The jungle thinned as Orion and the apex emerged onto a ridge overlooking a valley carved by ancient rivers. The air here felt sharper, cleaner, as if the forest itself granted a sanctum only in times of desperation. The apex's wounds shimmered faintly, its bioluminescent blood drying into thread-like lines across its flank. Orion stayed beside it, scanning the ridge's perimeter. The Fangstrike Guild was too disciplined to lose their trail for long. He needed a defensible position, and he needed it before their luck evaporated. A metallic clatter rang out behind them, followed by the steady crunch of armored boots. Orion spun, raising his weapon just as a massive figure stepped through the foliage. The exosuit that emerged dwarfed every mercenary they had fought earlier, its plating reinforced with dark alloy and jagged ridges that reflected the dim jungle light. The operator inside moved with predatory assurance, not the cautious gait of hired soldiers. "Commander Draft." Orion recognized him instantly, the mercenary guild's most ruthless hunter, infamous for dismantling entire ecosystems to capture apex specimens. His voice boomed through the suit speakers, dripping arrogance. "Human, you've caused me unnecessary delays." Orion kept the pistol steady. "I'm not the one trespassing into a restricted biome to kidnap a sentient predator." The apex stepped forward, its back arching, its glowing lines intensifying until they washed the ridge in a chilling cerulean hue. Drav angled the suit toward it with the ease of someone accustomed to hunting legends. "The Varaxel," Drav said almost admiringly. "Every species that's tried to tame your kind has perished. But that only proves your value." The apex responded with a guttural snarl that shook loose dust from the rocks. Orion saw the tension ripple through its frame, the loathing, the rage, the instinct to strike, but Drav's suit bristled with weaponry specifically designed to counter the creature's speed and strength. Drav's visor flicked toward Orion. "And you? A human wanderer with more stubbornness than sense. You've bonded with it somehow. Interesting but irrelevant." The exosuit's arms extended, revealing a tri-barreled cannon and an electrified capture lance. Drav's voice hardened. "Step aside. Or be turned into pulp." Orion's grip tightened. "You want the creature because you think it can be controlled. But it won't kneel for you." "It doesn't have to kneel," Drav replied. "It only needs to survive long enough for me to harvest what I need." The apex exploded into motion, launching itself with blinding speed. Drav reacted with equal precision, firing a concussive shockwave that caught the creature midair and hurled it back with a crushing impact. The ground trembled as the apex skidded across the ridge. Orion bolted toward the creature, but a bolt of plasma slammed into the earth ahead of him, forcing him to dive aside. Drav advanced, each mechanical step vibrating through the stone. The suit's gauntlet ignited with a crackling field designed to paralyze muscle and sear through hide. "Futile," Drav taunted. "I've brought down beasts twice its mass." Orion rose slowly, dust streaking his face, eyes blazing with defiance. "You've never hunted with me." The apex struggled upright, its breath ragged but determined. Orion moved to its flank and for a moment, their eyes met, a silent agreement forged through survival and necessity. Drav laughed, a harsh metallic bark. "You think your little alliance matters?" "It matters enough to kill you," Orion said. They attacked together. The apex surged forward, zigzagging to throw off targeting systems. Orion sprinted at its side, weaving between the suit's predicted firing angles. Drav unleashed a barrage of pulses, but every shot either missed by inches or struck terrain the apex redirected him toward. Orion dove beneath the suit's arm and fired into the joint servos. Sparks erupted, forcing the limb to seize for a moment. The apex seized that moment. It slammed into the suit with a roar that echoed across the valley. Drav countered with a retractable blade that flashed out with lethal speed. The apex twisted to evade, but the blade carved a shallow line across its shoulder, spilling luminous blood onto the rocks. Orion grabbed a fractured piece of the ridge and hurled it at Drav's helmet, drawing the commander's attention. The distraction was small, but it forced Drav to reorient, giving the apex time to recalibrate its stance. Drav snarled. "Persistent insects." He fired a burst of magnetic pulses that collapsed the ridge beneath Orion's feet. Orion slipped, grasping at loose stones to keep from falling. The apex lunged, placing itself between Drav and the unstable ground, shielding Orion from the next blast. The sight triggered something fierce within him. He climbed back up and charged the suit, slamming a knife into a seam near its knee. The blade sparked against circuitry, locking the joint. Drav roared in frustration, swinging the suit's arm toward him, but the apex intercepted the blow with a crushing bite to the forearm plating. Metal sheared. Wires snapped. The suit staggered. Orion saw the opening first. Now. The apex leapt, claws tearing into the weakened chest plate. Drav tried to fire another pulse, but the destabilized systems overloaded. Orion sprinted forward, grabbed the exposed power conduit and yanked it free. Energy flared violently. The exosuit collapsed with a deafening crash. The apex tore itself free of the wreckage, panting, trembling, but triumphant. Drav, now vulnerable inside the ruined machine, glared up at Orion with venomous disbelief. "You ruined everything," he rasped. "No," Orion said quietly. "You did." He backed away as the apex stepped forward, its shadow engulfing the defeated commander. Drav's expression shifted from fury to terrified realization. The ridge echoed once, then fell silent. Orion exhaled, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. The apex approached him, lowering its head until it aligned its gaze with his. There was no threat in its posture, only acknowledgement, of survival shared, of danger overcome, of trust fully earned. Before Orion could speak, the horizon lit with the glow of descending engines. A large ship broke through the clouds, its hull marked with the insignia of the Galactic Council. Its scanners swept the valley in deliberate sweeps, locking onto two signatures. One human. One apex predator. Orion felt the shift in air pressure as the ship prepared to land. The apex growled, sensing yet another confrontation forming. Orion placed a steady hand on its shoulder. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The creature's eyes glowed in agreement as the council vessel descended toward them, promising either salvation or a new war waiting to ignite. The council ship settled onto the ridge with a wash of magnetic stabilizers that rippled the foliage beneath it. Orion stepped forward, the apex at his side, its immense form casting a shadow over the landing deck. Soldiers emerged first, disciplined and wary, their weapons trained on the predator. Then came the scientists, clutching scanners and data pads, murmuring excitedly between themselves. Their astonishment was almost tangible. No human had ever exited the Varric jungle alive, and certainly not with its apex predator in tow. Orion kept his gaze steady, assessing the council's formation, noting the subtle shifts in posture that betrayed caution. The apex stood quietly beside him, muscles coiled but calm, as if sensing his intent and mirroring it. They moved together as a unit, predator and human, a combination no one on this planet, or any planet, had expected. A commanding officer stepped forward, his armor polished to a blinding sheen, his expression a mixture of incredulity and protocol-driven authority. Step aside, human. That creature is property of the Galactic Council. You have no claim. Orion's eyes narrowed, his voice quiet but carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs. Property? It's not property. It's alive, intelligent, and it chose me. I won't let you turn it into a weapon or cage it for study. A scientist interjected, voice quivering with excitement. Sir, with all due respect, this creature, its genetic potential, its adaptive physiology, it could redefine our understanding of apex evolution. Orion didn't respond immediately. He crouched slightly, resting a hand on the apex's shoulder. The creature shifted, a low rumble vibrating through its chest as though agreeing with him. It already knows what it is, Orion said. It doesn't need your laboratories to tell it its worth. I do. The commanding officer's hand twitched toward his sidearm, and the soldier stiffened. The apex's eyes glimmered with low, radiant warning lines that flared like a silent storm. The air thickened, charged with the weight of possibility and threat. Orion and the apex were no longer prey, they were apex predators in their own right, and the council's troops understood it instinctively. A tense moment passed, the standoff drawn tight like the string of a bow. Then Orion took a deliberate step forward, his stance unwavering. We leave. Together. The apex exhaled, a sound that resonated through the ship's hull like rolling thunder. It stepped beside him, brushing the railing with its massive shoulder. Soldiers raised weapons, but Orion's voice carried across the clearing, calm yet unyielding. Try anything and you'll see why the jungle didn't kill us. You'll see what happens when predators fight for choice, not orders. A ripple of uncertainty passed among the troops. The apex's gaze alone, intelligent and ancient, communicated a warning humans could not emulate. Orion's calm, unflinching presence amplified it. The soldiers lowered their weapons incrementally, realizing they faced not only raw power but calculated intent, the kind that only comes from surviving when the odds are astronomical. The commanding officer finally stepped back, hands raised. You're claiming the creature as your companion? Orion nodded. Yes, and it's choosing me. That's all that matters. The scientist hesitated, torn between awe and duty. One approached cautiously, scanning the apex with a portable analyzer. The creature allowed it, sitting rigid but without aggression. Orion's hand never left its shoulder. Unbelievable, the scientist muttered. It's responding to him. Like it understands him. Yes, Orion said softly. Because he does. For the first time, the council recognized that this was not a transaction, not a capture, not an experiment. This was a bond formed through shared survival, a pact forged in fire and blood, one that no law or protocol could undo. The soldiers and scientists alike felt the weight of it. An apex predator had chosen a human and in doing so had rewritten what they thought possible. Orion turned toward the descending ramp. Let's go. The apex mirrored his movement, its massive form folding neatly into a stride that matched his pace. Together, they descended from the ridge, moving with a quiet dominance that made the council officers step aside instinctively. The jungle's edge receded behind them, a living testament to the trials they had endured and the power they had earned. One of the younger soldiers whispered to his comrade. He actually walked out of the jungle alive. With it? Yes, the other said. And they both just survived what no one else could. As Orion and the Apex boarded the ship, a subtle shift occurred in the surrounding council personnel. Whispers of precedent, of policy, of the unthinkable circulated rapidly. No one had ever encountered a human capable of forming such a bond with a creature universally feared and worshipped as untouchable. Orion settled into the transport's forward hold, the Apex lying alongside him, its head near his knees. The Predator's breathing was steady now, synchronized with his own calm heartbeat. Orion allowed himself a moment to exhale, feeling the weight of months of tension begin to lift. He studied the creature's luminous lines, marveling at the subtle intelligence in its eyes. "You could have killed me," he murmured. "But you didn't." The Apex exhaled, a low, resonant sound that Orion understood perfectly. Not submission. Not fear. Recognition. Respect. Loyalty. Outside the viewport, the galaxy stretched vast and indifferent, stars twinkling like distant promises. Yet Orion knew, as did the Apex, that they were no longer insignificant. Together they had defied death, defied mercenaries, defied expectations. Humanity had proven once again that survival was not merely a matter of strength or firepower, but of instinct, courage, and the will to choose allies when none should exist. The ship hummed to life, lifting into the void, carrying with it the first human-Apex alliance in recorded history. Orion rested a hand on the creature's mane, feeling the subtle vibration of life and power. "The galaxy isn't ready for us yet," he said with a faint smirk. The Apex's gaze met his, a shared understanding passing silently between them. And in that moment Orion realized something profound. The universe did not define predators. Predators defined themselves, and sometimes they chose companions who could match them stride for stride, instinct for instinct. As the ship disappeared into the darkness of space, the Varric jungle receded behind them, shrouded once again in mystery, its Apex protector walking into legend beside the human who had earned its trust. Together they moved forward, a new chapter beginning. One where the galaxy would have to reckon with the alliance of predator and human, a force unbound, unyielding, and utterly alive.